So we have now reached our last speaker. When we started to kind of explore the Parisian design system community and the landscape, one of the first names that were told to me by more than one person, quite a few people, was Steve. The king of tokens, apparently. I'll just call him that, because it sounded good. And so, also because I need a segue. So we, as I said, we have gone from very broad and kind of big scale. We looked at something a bit more specific, and now we're going to go even more specific than to design tokens. So, without further ado, design tokens. Welcome, Steve.
Yes. Yeah, cool. There you go. All right. Switch hands. Yeah, so I'm pleased to be here. If you don't know me, I'm Steve. I've been an engineer for quite a while. I've been working on design systems for about 8 years now. I've been working in open source for 15, 16 years, and we're going to talk about open source and design tokens. So I'm sure that many people here are very familiar with design tokens because now they're kind of becoming mandatory in design systems, right? So all of us need to have our little tokens for our brands, and we need to create them and change them and like send them to our developers and make changes and not break everything and document them and all of that stuff, right? So it's a lot of tools. It's a lot of workflows that we need to build. And it's kind of amusing that, well, there are really only two tools that all of us use, right? And there are not that many others that have managed to grow and like build a user base and build recognition. And this is probably a sign of something, right? The fact that we only have Style Dictionary and Token Studio that are very, very much widespread is a sign that we are struggling with building the interoperability that we need. And I know for a fact that many teams, many engineers in particular, have built really cool stuff, lots of nice automations, right? We've seen just today, we've seen a design token documentation built in Storybook. This is something that's quite frequent, but people tend to keep it to themselves, right? And the reason for that is when we build all of these tools, we end up putting a lot of our own organization, our own team practices, our own knowledge, and our own ways of working into the tools just because it's easier. It's shortcuts that we take so that we can work faster. And at the end of the day, if we want to be able to share that to like other organizations, other teams, there's a bit of additional effort that we need to make. And the question is, how do we as a community design system practitioners, how do we make it so that we can reach that threshold a bit more easily? And there are two aspects to that conversation. We'll probably only have time for one because I've made way too many slides, so you will have to come to have a drink with us afterwards, right? And then you'll get the second part of the talk. The first one is, how do we, when we build design token tools, how do we apply them to more contexts? How do we generalize them to other contexts? And the second one is, when we have our little tools that we want to use, like Style Dictionary, Token Studio, I don't know, ledgers, documentation, how do we make sure that they work together? Right, and so we're going to explore two solutions to these two slightly different problems. So this is a pet project of mine. Been working on it for about 6 months, and the idea here is, my hypothesis for why we have so few public tools is we end up relying on way too many things that don't generalize well to other companies, right? So the way that we structure our design token files, right, the way that we organize our modes and themes and whatnot, you know, we end up taking shortcuts. If I have this file in this specific folder, then it means that I have a mode for this specific platform. And then if I'm working with another like theme, I don't have that file, so I don't have a mode. And then I've created a constraint, a coupling between how I think about mode availability and how I organize my data. And then if I want to take my tool to another team and they organize their files differently, they end up having to do some engineering work to reuse my tool. Right? Same thing with token taxonomies, right? Of course, a surface token is a background token on this side of a room, and then a background token is a background token on that side of a room, because we don't name them the same way, right? And then some people do Tailwind, some people do CSS, so we need to transform all our tokens and map them to what's available on a platform and how things are usually done on the platform, and all of that stuff, you know, adds up. And what I believe we should try to do, and that's at this point it might sound a bit abstract, but we should try and find a way to separate the logic that we're creating in our tools, right? I want to display some types of tokens in a documentation, or I want to review whether some tokens interact with each other in a code base, from the specifics of what it means for a design token to be a background token, or what it means for a design token to come from a specific mode. And so the idea here is we're going to go through a bit of so for a bunch of tools that we can see online, and we're going to see like what kind of specific knowledge they've embedded in their tools and how we could generalize it. So here, for instance, we've got Datadog. I think it's one of the best design token documentation sites. It's very thorough, lots of customized stuff. And they've got CSS, they've got less, they've got TypeScript variables, they've got Figma variables, and we can see that there are different syntaxes on different platforms, right? So I could be saying, design token is named so-and-so on Figma, and it's named so-and-so on CSS. Or I could be saying, in my platform, I have in my organization, I have these different platforms, and you can take the standardized DTCG design token name and translate it in that specific way to have the name on that platform. And if I just go through this little layer of generalization, then anybody can come with their own new platform, or they can come with their own way that they prefer to name CSS variables, because people have opinions on that. And then we can see as well, like a bunch of things that we'll get back to, right? There's a little bit of a preview here, a different way of showing design tokens. These are size design tokens. And if you look carefully here, you can see as well that because these are spacing tokens, they also have a representation that actually shows the use of space, right? It's not just a square blob. It actually shows it in context, and it makes it easier to understand. Right, so this is the France Télévisions documentation for design tokens. It's built on Astro. We can see here that we have different subtypes of tokens, right? So for border radiuses, we have our own preview system that we use. And we can see as well that we have a bunch of different like token names, which come from different platforms as well, right? And then we have another type of design token, and we have another preview type. Now, both of these, border radius and spacing and the padding here, they're all considered size tokens, right? If you just look at the standard and what we have in the tools that we use, they're the same token type. But we don't want to show them in the same way, right? So we want to have this generalization. I want to be able to say that spacing around in my company is a padding, even though most companies are going to call them paddings, right? And then we can go like into a bit more detail. So I apologize for the projector. It's it's contrasted. So this is Node Health. They have background and foreground colors, and specifically when they have foreground colors, they compute contrast colors against a specific background. So here we have different types of color tokens, and we are exploiting a relationship between these different types that also don't exist in the DCCG. And we can go on. So this is the backmarket documentation. We can see that we have links to primitive tier tokens that are used in documentation. And then if we look at Pinterest Gestalt, we can see as well a little subtext below the previews. We can see that we have links as well to primitive tokens. And more interestingly, we can see that there's an awareness of mode sources, right? So this first token on the first line doesn't have a dark mode value, right? So the team that builds this documentation, they have managed to retain the information that this specific token only exists in light mode. And this is valuable information as well, right? If you want to show documentation on a multi-mode, on a white label system, it's kind of useful to explain how tokens are inherited. This helps a lot with debugging and understanding why a value is not the way that you wanted it to. Right, and then this is one favorite of mine. So we built at France Télévisions, we built a token diff algorithm, which allowed us to build a bunch of services. So here, for instance, when we change a token on Token Studio, we go through building our design tokens for all 20-ish platforms that we have, and then we end up seeing how values change on different platforms. So here, for instance, we know that for Outremer, which is a overseas news website, we can see that the specific 2 tokens were added with the specific colors in the specific modes. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times this little diff algorithm has saved our asses. Like, we've made so many mistakes. We changed the wrong file. We have a bug in a color transform library. We have a casing bug that doesn't work with Tailwind or with SAS or whatever. Like, this has been extremely useful. Then, of course, we can use that. We can have a bit more of like semantic reasoning. This is very workflow specific. We consider that a breaking change for us is when we remove a token, right? If a platform has a token but just disappears because we've removed it or because we've reorganized our files and somehow we've lost it, we want to make sure to bring it to the attention of the designers before they press a button and send it to production, right? In other teams and other contexts, you might want to say, well, this is the bunch of tokens that have change values, and I want to go and see in which files they were used, in which projects or products they were used, and I want to send a message to engineers before I send to production. So this might be a different workflow that you want to build on top of that information. Right, and then of course, well, I mean, if we have a token diff algorithm, we can generate change logs, and then we no longer have to do it by hand, which is really cool. And so on and so forth. And of course, if you are aware of all the different values and syntaxes that your tokens have on all your different platforms, you can build a search engine, and you can go from your dev tools where you have a stranded value that doesn't make any sense, and you can figure out what might be the source for that value. So these are all tools that have been built in the past. There's a bunch of others that I'd like to have time to show. And all of these tools rely on information about platforms, about the specific semantics and meanings attached to them, about the modes that are in use, which to some extent is different from organization to organization. And my goal here is, can we consolidate all of that data, all of that knowledge that forms our dependencies into a generic, reusable format, so that we can have, on the one end, people creating design tokens, and on the other end, people creating tools, and we meet in the middle, and we stop all this wastage of building things in our corner. So this is the pet project I've been working on. The token listing format is a format that bridges together the information that you have in your source tokens that you're storing in whatever tool you like, really, and the information for your tokens that are built on your different platforms. So as I'm sure you're aware, Style Dictionary is the most commonly used tool for transforming tokens and deploying them to code bases. If you're using something else, there's a 95% chance that they're using Style Dictionary. So you are using Style Dictionary. There's an alternative, of course. Terrazzo. Terrazzo is built by a design system engineer at Figma. And, well, I guess I'm a contributor as well. So we're going to talk about that. And, of course, well, the folks at Style Dictionary, the folks at Terrazzo are all involved in the W3C. So it's all of it's a community of sharing and building together and figuring out problems. And we're quite happy with that. So we all start here, right? We have our tokens. It doesn't really matter where you get them from, a bunch of options. And then at some point, when you want to switch to code, when you want to switch to production, or you just want to, handle multiple platforms, even sometimes go back to Figma, you're going to need to translate them, right? And that translation is very often these two tools. And so what we're going to be doing with token listing is we're going to have this joint format supported in Terrazzo and supported in Style Dictionary that outputs the same data. And then we're going to have tools that are going to use this format to provide services, right? So we're going to build design token documentation in Storybook. I'm going to do it, so I can make the claim. We're going to build a token diff algorithm as well. So this is implemented. It's going to go live at some point. We're definitely going to build a MCP server for design tokens. And in fact, this whole project started with Graham Lipp's Figma MCP server. So we wanted to have a way for him to translate Figma variables into the names that are used in code in a way that is more reliable than just letting the LLM guess. And of course, I've seen a few documentation sites, and I know that some people also dabble in token scripts. I want to see more tools out there that use this format because that's what it's about. So this is now, you've been lulled, you've been brought here, and you thought that you were going to escape it, but this is now the moment where we're going to look at code together. So I told you that the key value of this listing format is that we can translate names between platforms, right? So of course, on the left-hand side, on all the following slides, you're going to have the configuration in Terrazzo. On the right-hand side, you're going to have the outcome. And we can see here that we want to have our design tokens expressed in CSS and Figma. We're going to use the default naming available for CSS in Terrazzo, but we could customize it. And we're going to build a very complicated algorithm to figure out the Figma name. And then we can see here that for our color black 100, we have the two different names that appear in the way that we expect them. And now we're able to bridge together the name in Figma and the name in CSS with an authoritative source. We're also going to want to track modes in our software. And this piece of information is critical when you build documentation. You need to figure out what modes you have, what default value you should apply, what different values you should provide, right? And this is exactly the select where you're going to switch, you're going to select your theme, you're going to select your device, and you want that in Storybook as well, of course. And then we can carry that information over and we can say, well, look, this is color black 100 and this specific value comes from the light mode. And then this is size spacing SM and this specific value comes from the mobile mode, right? And the ability to track that information becomes very useful when you build documentation, because if you don't track it throughout all your tools, at some point you end up just, and anyone who's used Style Dictionary will know that, you end up with just this massive build output and you just have the values. And you can't even really tell if, like your size tokens, your spacing tokens, or your padding tokens, you can't really tell if they are impacted by your breakpoints. Right? If you want to know that, you need to go back to the source data, and it's just kind of cumbersome and it creates doubt. So it's good to be able to have that information. This token comes from that specific mode, and you know why. I've talked a lot about the different types of relationships we have between colors and size tokens. So we've come up with a list of subtypes that are commonly used. This is out of an audit of a lot of leading platforms. So very obviously, if people want to add stuff to that list, they can get in touch and we can talk. But we figured that just having this information here allows you to basically map the way that you name your tokens in your taxonomy with the way that you want to exploit your tokens in prod, right? And then you can have nicer previews. If you're doing Tailwind, you can tell that your border colors are the ones that are going to go into border dash something and so on, right? This is actually critical for Tailwind. So, just continuing, of course, whenever you have a design tokens, you want to have a value that you can just display on a web product, that you can display on an ID in a little plugin when you hover on a variable name. So it's just useful to have a preview value. So we also make sure that you have a CSS compatible value for every token that you pass through the format. We make sure to keep track as well of the source files that you have. So then if you want to build a link back to your design token creation software or to your GitHub or GitLab repository where you store your data, then you can build that link back and you can go back and see the source and edit it a bit faster. We're tracking as well and this is where I should say, I've said it, I hope, but this is an alpha version, so there's still going to be a bunch of changes. But we also want to make sure that we track the aliases back to lower tiers of design tokens that you've been using, so that you can build that whole chain in your tools and you can figure out at what level you want to intervene when you need to change a token. So this information is provided as is for now. There might be a few syntax changes before we go 1.0, we'll see. The idea behind that is we want to make sure that you, as users of design token tools, you no longer have to go through configuring every tool yourselves, and you don't have to go through transforming your data and then mapping your configuration between different tools, but that there's one way that you can configure a bunch of tools that you'll use. And of course, for developers, it's a lot nicer not to have to build all of that input, all of those config options, and just support a format that is version, that has a JSON schema, and that is somewhat consistent and predictable, and that has implementations as well. So please try it. Please take your phones out and screen that if you want to participate, if you want to give feedback, if you want to try it, if you need help. This is something that is probably going to go 1.0 in a few months, so there's still time to weigh in and try it out. And that concludes part one. I'm now going to look to Luis and ask him, how many minutes do I have left? 2. Okay. Part 2 is going to be at the pub. Just a little teaser, just so you know. The W3C has come up with a new way of representing design tokens that allows you to basically better map I'm just going to switch a little bit. This is all the cool stuff that we won't talk about. And here we go. Right, so the idea is to make sure that you have a unique way of representing all of your source tokens and how they combine together to build your outputs, right? And a lot of that is you have sets of tokens that you want to merge together. And again, if you've built design token pipelines, you know that every tool has a different way of including and merging tokens, and it can be a mess. And this is also a way that you can represent modes, right? So you can say, well, this is my color scheme mode, and by default it's light, and then you load those files, and then this is the alternative is dark, and you load those other files, and it allows us to build cool stuff like this is out of battery, like this, right? So this is a live product that we have on the Terrazzo repo, where you can basically switch your different modes, where you can select different modes, and you have your build output that is just available for you. And because this is a W3C community standard, this is what every tool is going to be doing in 6 to 12 months, right? So it's just going to be nicer for all of us, and it's going to make it easier for us to combine tools. And if you want more details, we can talk more about it at the pub. And I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Steve? I feel like there's a lot of questions. Okay, I have it. Yeah, if someone wants to participate, I know you had a code there for feedback, but what if I want to gain on it? What do I do?
What if you want to, sorry?
What if I want to gain on it? What if I want to participate? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. So we are just going to go back. We might not be able to go back. I think this is dead. So we're going to go forward instead. Yeah, it's fine. It's probably going to appear at some point. Right, so the W3C resolver spec, it's a DTCG project. So DTCG is a community group for the W3C. It's not an official standard. It's something that like people like you can participate to. So there's a GitHub repo, and people ask questions and make proposals, and then we debate them for 1 or 2 years, and then we make a decision, and then things happen. It's powered by a lot of the people that you'd expect in the community, including Figma, Token Studio, Style Dictionary, which is the same team as Token Studio now, and a bunch of other people. And it is absolutely open to everyone. So you can go and ask questions there, and you can go and make proposals, and you can go and challenge ideas as well. The resolver spec is slightly outside of W3C DTCG for now, because we want to be able to move faster, and we want to be able to make mistakes without being held accountable. So we're building it as a joint format between Style Dictionary and Terrazzo. So there's an RFC, the QR code, if you manage to get it in time, there's an RFC pointing to the Style Dictionary repo, and then that's where we discuss the schema and the different versions, and that's where you can get news on the token listing.
Excellent. Any further comments? No? Well, in that case, thank you so much. I know you had a lot to go through, but big applause. Thank you. I'll take this.